FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
I would start off on the Murdoch thing. Murdoch basically said, we're considering not allowing Google search to have access to any of our newspapers, so they won't be available. You can come back and say, but that means that you will miss a lot of people being exposed to the Wall Street Journal online if you do that. Murdoch is a guy, you have to start with this assumption. He's not internet savvy. I mean, he doesn't do email. I mean, he has his secretary print out the emails and he reads them, all right? And start with that. Start with the second point, which is that anytime you hear Murdoch throw down the gauntlet like that, you have to assume that maybe it's a negotiating ploy, and he's trying. What all these guys want is for Google to pay more money, or start paying some money, to them, as they've started to do with YouTube, as they did with the publishers, with the book deal. So with that as a setting for discussion, one of the basic problems, and I go through this in the latter part of the book. Every newspaper is now talking about creating what Murdoch talks about, a firewall. They don't talk about blocking the search, but it's a consequence of that. They're saying, we'll create a firewall that you can't read the New York Times online unless you subscribe to it or you pay some kind of micropayment system. And every newspaper, a lot of newspapers are talking about that. Here are the problems with that. First of all, in order to succeed at that, you have to change the culture of the internet, which is a culture that essentially says information should be free. And can you succeed in changing the culture? Question mark. Tough. Okay. Second thing, if the New York Times creates a firewall, and the Wall Street Journal creates a firewall, and the Washington Post creates a firewall, but the Associated Press doesn't, and Bloomberg doesn't, and Reuters doesn't, and the Christian Science Monitor, which is published 6 days a week online, doesn't, and the Seattle Intelligencer, which is totally a online newspaper today, if they don't, then the firewall has been breached, and people they don't even know where they're getting their information, which worsens the problem of the established newspapers, because then news really is a commodity that you don't know what it is, and the brand New York Times doesn't mean as much as it once did. The third problem are hackers. You're assuming that people won't figure out a way to get around your firewall. So it's really tough to do. Do I believe that newspapers have to try things like that? Yes, I do. Or as Sarah Palin would say, you betcha. I mean, I think you gotta try different things to get income. And one of the things that John Hennessy, who's the president of Stanford, a computer scientist, said to me, and he's on the board of Google, he said to me in an interview in late last fall, he said, I think the mistake we made in the internet was that we didn't start charging people. I think we relied on advertising. One of the things that people realized with the recession is that the internet and the companies on the internet were really like the broadcast networks were 20 years ago. They had one source of income in broadcast television, which is one of the reasons why cable ate their lunch. Cable had two sources of income. They had advertising, plus they had subscriptions. And here are these internet companies like Google are totally dependent on just advertising. It was back to the future again. And so I think the recession crystallized the thought that maybe we have to start thinking about what, in fact, iTunes has helped pioneer, charging. Or if you go to Match.com, you pay, you're a subscriber to that. And Mark Andreessen, who's a brilliant guy, and who actually gave me a nice blurb for this book, he said to me, I'm inches away from asking for the credit card numbers of the people who are on my social network, Ning. And I think there's this growing sense that you got to figure out some other income stream.